Well, good afternoon. Thank you for joining. I have the privilege here today to share in this keynote for the Mobile Digital Afternoon session and to share what the Department of Veterans Affairs did in response to the pandemic from a technology perspective. First, just a few brief things about myself. I'm currently the director for the messaging collaboration team, which focuses on delivering Microsoft 365 services to VAs, 550,000 users. We deliver services both on-premise users as well as remote users. And I've worked for VA for about 21 years. That started back with just replacing terminals with PCs. And then I moved on to some system work, servers and those types of things, onto security. And then I moved on to our engineering section here in VA, where I focused on endpoint security and VA mobility for about 10 years. And now I'm fortunate within the last year and a half to focus on a new team that focuses on the technology that we use to collaborate every day, which includes some of the mobile experience that we have here in VA. Before I get started, I wanted to give another example of the time when our nation, in our history, we came together to meet the demands of a crisis. American manufacturers in World War II were engaged in one of the greatest military industrial efforts in history. In 1939, total aircraft production in the United States was around 3,000 planes. By the end of the war, the U.S. had produced over 300,000 planes. So when we look at challenges from a country perspective, often we rise and meet those challenges. And this is no different for us. Our nation's veterans are on those front lines every day, whether it's overseas or if they're providing some sort of support here, the National Guard, our military risking their lives, giving their lives for our freedoms and our safety and taking care of us when we're here. So I'm honored to be able to serve VA, serving those who have served. As everybody knows, just a few short months ago, a new challenge arose for this country, as well as the world. The global pandemic went from vague news stories about China having some sort of virus to hitting our shores very quickly. Given the last time the world saw a pandemic this size was almost 100 years ago, over 100 years ago, we had to move quickly to prevent another disaster. From the very first charge to ramp up services, the VA's OIT team, led by our CIO, Mr. James Gaffer, who's a veteran himself, OIT charged forward. As some of you may know, VA has a fourth mission as well, which is to care for citizens during a country's crisis, which the pandemic certainly fit. This was also a focus of OIT to ensure we covered all of the needs, not only of our nation's veterans, but also our fellow citizens. Our CIO expressed our mission for VA and for OIT, the commitment to delivering the best care and services to all veterans, as well as taking care of our citizens. That mission was accepted and taken into action by every single level of OIT. With that, we focused on two key areas that I'm going to talk about here a little bit, which are telework and telehealth. First, I want to talk a little bit about VA and just give some reference points of what VA is and how large we are. We are the second largest U.S. federal agency. We support over 19 million veterans. OIT supports customers in the Veterans Health Administration, VHA, the Veterans Benefits Administration, VBA, and the National Cemetery Administration, which is otherwise known as NCA. We have 171 VA medical centers, 1,269 outpatient facilities with approximately 9 million veterans enrolled in VA healthcare. Additionally, we have 56 regional benefit offices and 141 veteran cemeteries. Needless to say, we have a large and geographically diverse organization with a noble mission. One of our focuses during COVID, as I had stated before, is telework. We took action to focus on scalable, on-demand architecture to enable expansion quickly, as well as post-COVID, the ability to retract that quickly as well. The coronavirus meant transitioning much of the VA workforce of over 400,000 employees to telework. This all happened in a matter of days, not months. We supported this transition. We moved to increase our capacity, expand the remote access options, provision equipment, and expand bandwidth across our enterprise. Currently, I have a team of about 35 people, and it's certainly a different experience for me. I'm 100% telework, so I work from home all the time. So as far as working from home and having the equipment that I have, I was prepared and ready to go. What's changed is we would go to monthly meetings at some of our offices. We would meet face-to-face with vendors or other partners inside the organization. And we've all had to change that. So we've gone from some of these physical meetings where we were able to sit across from each other and share stories and do good work and those types of things, to really focusing solely on these collaborative type tools that we have. So I want to focus just on a couple of those things that we've done to meet the demands of the organization as we focused on that remote access first. And just a couple examples here. We've doubled our VPN compatibility, or capability rather, from 120,000 users to over 240,000 users. And we optimized our CAG access from 16,000 to over 42,000 users. And that's not where we're stopping. We plan on targeting our VPN for over 500,000 and our remote access using the CAG, the access gateway, to over 130,000. So we met the demand of the outbreak that we had, and we're preparing for any future outbreaks that may happen, including something that may happen this fall. So a few things from my own team as we were working through this. In March, we were just beginning to focus on our migration from Microsoft Skype to Microsoft Teams, which Teams gives us our ability to collaborate better. We can leverage the mobile capabilities and have access to more features that allow for better collaboration across the organization. So we met the mission command, which was accelerate. Do these things faster, but do them in the same manner as far as security and controls and communication and the user experience. So the first weekend, as we had gone into this, we migrated over 12,000 of our OIT staff to Teams only, which they moved from Skype to Teams. And we gave that functionality to our OIT staff so that they could continue to collaborate as COVID expanded its move throughout the country and throughout the hospitals. And what we also did, recognizing the fact that the collaboration pieces were there, we also migrated VA staff over to licensing for Teams, which gave our ability to all 530,000 plus VA staff the ability to join those Teams calls and engage in collaboration. Normally, this process takes us months. I'd like to say months, that'd be on the short end, usually anywhere from 6 to 9 to 12 months to get that done. We tackled this in just a few short weeks. Additionally, we look at expanding our capability to connect to Office 365 resources on our mobile devices without a VPN. We've been working on some things for direct access to 365 and support of TIC 3.0. But with this new mission requirement, we accelerated that as well. And we didn't do these things haphazardly. We took a look at what those requirements were from a security perspective, a communication perspective, a training perspective, and what the user would expect for those things. And we shrunk those timelines down considerably. We look at things like our EMM to manage our mobile devices, and then our Windows 10 devices managed by some other tools. So to even expand on that, what we did is we took Windows Defender ATP, which we had 0 deployments in our organization in March. In just under 30 days, we deployed 500,000 endpoints with Defender ATP, so we could bolster our security posture with Windows 10 devices, also connecting externally to the organization without VPN, but with full protection. For us, this is a significant development, really, in the deployment for the agency, but it took a commitment from VA staff, from VA leadership, and our partners to be able to do these deployments. Like I said, normally in VA, these things take time, sometimes months. The ATO process can go on longer than that, sometimes up to a year. Though through the dedication of a VA team, we close those gaps to days and weeks. As an example, for our direct 365 services, where we leverage this on the mobile device as well as those Windows 10 devices, they can go directly to the 365 SaaS. We had to make sure that we had those rules in place to make sure the devices were coming in were appropriate, the type of user coming in was appropriate, and they had the correct security controls and credentials to get in. We also had to make sure all of the security controls themselves were in place, And of course, and not the least, is the customer experience. You can turn all of these things on, you can overlay security on top of them, but if the customer does not like the experience, you've really done this all for naught. So I had many members on my team, from Harvey Hayes and Brian Backus and Tom Marzalak, leading for Exchange and our MS teams, to build this vessel, if you will, to make all this happen. We worked in hand with our security staff to identify controls, mitigate risk, and put all of this, of course, into action. And then, of course, if you've been in government long enough, you know that there has to be documentation. So we didn't throw any of that out the window. What we did was we committed to getting these things done by meeting daily, sometimes several times daily, normally into the evening and up early hours, to get those controls and everything documented for our security folks, as well as the ATOs that are required for all of this work. So when we look at these examples, it was vital for us to continue to expand what we were doing for the organization, so that the staff could meet the demands of the veteran, no matter where the veteran was at, whether it was coming into the hospital or if they had to do telemedicine. We have other staff, administrative staff, that of course has to stay connected, so we can do things like contracts and making sure that PPE and all of those types of things are happening while people are working remotely and not sitting with their staff at the hospitals or program offices. So we did is our fellow IT colleagues came together. We had intense focus, endless commitment, and long hours to achieve milestones, again, that would have taken months or longer, down to less than 60 days. So lots of hard work there to get all of this done. And this happened during the pandemic, which nobody was immune from, right? From the perspective of worrying about is someone going to get it? And of course, we all have our individual lives. We have families that live with us and families that do not live with us, and making sure that people had all the necessities, from food down to the hot commodity of toilet paper and paper towel and hand sanitizer. So while all of this is going on, the VA did not miss a beat when it came for the OIT staff to meet the demands of making sure that these happened. So when we look at some of the other things, and I've talked a little bit about what it looked like from a remote access, and I want to touch a little bit on the VA's expanded telehealth. We increased capacity and functionality, and it's really one of VA's greatest achievements when you look at that. The telehealth and mental health support, the ability for the veteran to connect back to a provider inside VA using the device that they need, which includes mobile devices and Windows laptops and Macs and all of those other things. We were able to do that, and we wanted to give the providers and the veterans the confidence that we could rapidly adopt these technologies and provide those remote service support tools to facilitate these virtual encounters. In fact, we tripled concurrent telehealth visit capacity. From January to May, we increased telehealth visits by over 1,000%, an approximate 10% increase in VA video connects, with 25,000 daily video connects as of late May, which is a comparison to early January, which was just around 2,000. OIT also provided expanded use of the tele-ICU to allow for the ability to connect to these intensive care-led teams, to give access to staff that had the specialty to be able to triage and meet the needs of those veterans that were in other locations. They are able to do things like monitor and assess patients remotely. So all of these things came together to allow for providers to meet with patients. And we streamlined things like logging in, so they only had one single sign-on access rather than multiple. At the end, we had 82 locations are getting the tele-ICU cards, which is 225 total. So again, these expansions help the ability for our staff to be able to meet the demands of the veteran, as well as the staff that was serving those. Some of the other things that we did for a remote external experience for our staff and the veterans themselves, we leveraged technology to communicate with the veterans. I just mentioned telehealth and telemental health. We used a product, VetText, to send automated SMS messages to veterans in the 50 states and the US territories. We developed a COVID-19 fax interactive chatbot. So those common questions that veterans may want to come onto the website and find out some of those simple things that everybody's thinking about rather than having to wait for somebody to talk to. They leveraged a chatbot. We wanted to be able to reduce those calls so people could leverage the mobile technologies, the remote technologies to answer those common questions using some of those self-help tools. We use the Annie app to allow veterans to monitor symptoms and advise when they should contact their care teams. So all of this goes into the ability for our veterans to interact with VA staff, no matter where they're at, and to expand that to a large amount of different types of and diverse devices that are out there. And all of this takes place because VA and the OIT staff, partnering with our VA staff, those that are caring for the veteran, those that are taking care of the veterans and serving the veterans in a variety of ways, came together and met those demands by focusing on that mission. I'm proud of the work that the VA is doing. My father is a veteran. My son-in-law, in fact, today just finished BMT. We watched his graduation live on Facebook. So that was sort of exciting to see that live for Facebook. Of course, my daughter would have loved to have been there, but virtually was something that she cherished. So I come from a family, grandfathers and uncles and aunts serving in the military. So to be able to give back to them, I'm honored to do so. We had many of our OIT leadership from Jack Alvin and Eddie Poole and my direct leadership, Mark Hutchins and Matt Canavan, working together to clear those common barriers that we see all across the government. Right? It doesn't make a difference what agency you work for. We all know some of those individual work streams or processes or those teams that perhaps take a little bit longer. We threw all of those out the window. And we work together and strived to focus on meeting the VA's mission to serve the veteran and serve their families. With that, I thank you for the opportunity to speak. And on behalf of my fellow colleagues, again, appreciate the ability to share this with VA. And with that, thank you and God bless.
Thanks, Don.
I can't hear Isaac.
Hear me.
I think your signal's going.
Let's give this another try. Thanks for joining me this afternoon for the 5G panel in the mobile and digital track. My name is Isaac Constance, and I'm the senior staff writer at GovLoop, which is a media organization and community for government employees. Of course, been in the news a whole bunch recently. The phone from here on out. So hopefully you can hear me there. If there is any sort of echo, definitely let me know. So without further ado, let me just introduce us to the panelists for today. We'll be talking about 5G. Lieutenant Kenny Miltenberger currently serves as the co-chair of the Coast Guard's Mobility Council and sponsors representative for surveillance systems. He was responsible for the Coast Guard's Enterprise Mobility Roadmap and Implementation Plan, requirements management, and resourcing, development of mobile processes and policy, and lifecycle oversight for mobile devices, applications, and infrastructure. Lieutenant Miltenberger will be transferring to lead the Coast Guard's Blue Team on Friday, the 12th of June. That is tomorrow, so congrats, Kenny. Next, we also have Alan Hill. Alan is the Deputy Assistant Commissioner for Category Management, who provides executive leadership over a portfolio of acquisition solutions through which customer agencies procure more than $9 billion in IT products and services. These solutions include the government-wide acquisition contracts Alliant 2, Alliant Small Business 2, Vets 2, and 8A Stars. In addition, his portfolio also
includes Enterprise Infrastructure Solutions, or EIS, and the U.S. Access Shared Services Program. And of course, we have Dr. DJ Shai. He is the Principal Communications Engineer with the MITRE Corporation. DJ has 29 years of industry experience in wireless communications, 19 years at MITRE. He has significant experiences in 3G, CDMA, 4G, LTE, 5G, 6G, including systems RF design and optimization, protocol security, Arctic 5G labs, and security testbed, lab field performance testing, and spectrum sharing and interference mitigation. He is the chair of the 5G Secure Profile Working Group. He's also a 5G technical advisor for government sponsors. DJ received his MS and PhD degrees in electrical engineering from Georgia Institute of Technology in Atlanta, Georgia. So thanks everybody for joining me. And again, sorry for those technical difficulties earlier on. I'd love to have some more information about what our panelists are doing with 5G. So with that, DJ, why don't we get started with you?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, can
people hear me? Sorry, I want to make sure that, sure, thank you, Isaac. My primary responsibilities are the following, that you mentioned a few of those, just for recap, that we provide 5G advice to multiple government sponsors, especially in 5G security, 5G network slicing. You mentioned about architect 5G testbed for prototyping experimentation. We also conduct 5G field testing on commercial 5G networks and evaluate true performance. The emphasis is true performance, right? So we should not believe everything we heard from the commercials. That I also mentioned about I'm the chair of 5G skill profile quarterly working group meetings. And working groups, also we are quarterly meeting with participants from government and 5G industry. Also, I'm championing 5G standards effort, including work with government stakeholders to gather requirements and determine priorities, develop a 3GPP 5G technical contribution to meet the government requirements, liaise with 3GPP members, government, industry to obtain support or proposed contribution. I'll be able to address more of that later, but I want to pass the opportunity to other panelists. Thank you. Back to you.
Thanks, DJ.
Alan, why don't we go to you next? What's your work with 5G and what have you been doing recently?
Thank you, Isaac. At GSA, as the category manager responsible for the acquisition contracts that support our federal customers, my primary role is to make sure that we provide technology to support 5G and 5G itself to our customers that can be trusted. I'm also part of the committee to secure 5G representing GSA and also the committee to secure telecommunications. Thank you, Isaac.
Of course, and then
finally, let's go to Lieutenant Miltenberger, who is the co-chair of the Coast Guard's Mobility Council and sponsors representative for surveillance system. Kenny, what have you been working on and what's your role in 5G?
Thanks, Isaac. Yeah, first thing will be installing some 5G access for your house there. But seriously, so been doing a lot of work with ATARC here. So DJ Shai and I have been leading ATARC's 5G working group, and one of our recent outputs was the 5G executive white paper. And one of the reasons we did this is because 5G is a very complicated thing, and too often we jump immediately into extreme technical detail that can be very difficult for our senior leaders to understand and appreciate. So when we say things like millimeter wave, standalone, non-standalone, network slicing, all these wonderful things that inherent with 5G technology, we want to be able to frame them in a way our senior leaders can understand. So we just put that white paper out. You can Google it if you Google ATARC 5G Executive White Paper and get the basics of what 5G is. And we think that's really important, especially for a lot of our senior leadership in the government. Besides that, from the Coast Guard perspective, we've been providing 5G use cases to DISA, who's collecting those as part of the Federal Mobility Working Group. And our next ATARC assignment is going to be a paper on zero trust strategies for 5G. So how do we implement 5G securely for our enterprises? And we're almost all in agreement that focuses around zero trust. Beyond that, very specific to the Coast Guard, some of our use cases and exploration in 5G technology have really been what you might consider the most boring forms of 5G, where really use it for as a replacement for traditional means. So we don't actually have a lot of Wi-Fi deployed throughout the Coast Guard. So exploring the idea of what if instead of deploying Wi-Fi, we deployed 5G or private 5G, and what does that even look like? And what is the offering of public or private 5G right now? And moreover, for last mile connectivity for our cutters. So we actually have a big problem where we have a lot of legacy copper connections going to cutters on piers. So what if we deployed 5G as a last mile solution to increase their pier side connectivity? Again, very early exploration of these ideas. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Kenny. Well, why don't we stick with you? And I know one thing about 5G right now is it's been in the news.
There's tons of conspiracy theories going around.
The fact that 5G actually causes coronavirus, amongst many other sorts of radiation, whatever it is. So I'm
guessing these theories don't carry any merit. But
if not, what really is 5G, and what explains kind of the fear behind it for so many people and organizations?
Sure. So it's a great question, and for the record, I am not a medical doctor. I do have a master's in electrical engineering, so I know how to read papers and technical papers. But uh, really, the from my perspective, a lot of the fear with 5G is overblown. So what you see, I believe, is the culmination of a lot of misunderstanding and fear and change that's coming with 5G. So 5G operates in or part of 5G operates in what we call millimeter wave spectrum, which is a very, very high frequency. 5G is not the first technology to use millimeter wave out there, and so I think a lot of the fear comes from that because of certain signal characteristics of the millimeter wave. It doesn't go through. It doesn't travel through buildings, walls, as well as your traditional 4G frequency band. So what this means is you need more access points. And so I believe a lot of people get concerned. It's like, oh, well, there's going to be a lot more access points. There's a lot more radiation. But, according to the FDA, uh, there's no credible threat caused by 5G or millimeter wave. And moreover, if you do some of the research and read up on the International Commission for Non-Ionizing Radiation, you find that they've been looking at this problem for a long time, and that they really can't find any serious health risks associated with this operating 5G within levels prescribed by the FCC. So one interesting thing, and the kind of difference here is like, well, ionizing radiation, non-ionizing radiation, what's the difference? So non-ion or ionizing radiation is like gamma rays and X-rays, and those like go through you and destroy your DNA. And so that can have very harmful health effects. Non-ionizing radiation does not. And so what you actually find reading a lot of these studies is that the only consistent health effect you'll find is that if you're exposed to millimeter wave, you might feel a slight warming of the skin, and that's like at high volumes. And so the reason this is because millimeter wave is so high on the frequency spectrum that it's actually kind of close to infrared. And so if you're familiar with infrared radiation from the sun, actually warms the skin a little bit. And so that's not to say that you're going to get sunburn from 5G or anything like that, but that's the only repeatable, credible health impact that at least I've seen so far.
Great, yeah, and that's definitely reassuring.
Sorry for the
like
lecture.
you said, Kenny, I might be using 5G in the near future in New Orleans. I certainly need I'm saying it. So you, it seems to me the more credible threat to 5G is actually cybersecurity, and we're still very much in the early days of doing all the legwork for a nationwide rollout of 5G.
What is the importance of doing that security work up front so that we're really prepared for what's next?
Sorry, I think that one's for Alan, right?
Correct. Hey, Alan, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you now.
Okay. All right, good. There we go. All right. So 5G standard represents a significant enhancement to security over 4G. But it also brings new vulnerabilities. 5G now incorporates standard enterprise authentication, virtualization, and stronger encryption than 4G, while addressing some of the security vulnerabilities that exist within the 4G network. Despite these advancements in security, organizations need to remain vigilant when implementing 5G. Many of the security enhancements are an optional capability that may not be also supported by all equipment. Experts anticipate that 5G adoption will significantly increase the number of connected devices, thus increasing the attack surface for threat actors to take advantage of. As Kenny was talking about, you require more antennas in order for 5G to be deployed because of the wave, the millimeter wave requires more dense antennas in order for it to support. 5G standards open and transparent. There's been a significant number of contributions of the standard by Chinese companies. Internationally, one of the most prominent security concern is supply chain and the proper production of 5G equipment. If a non-trustworthy piece of equipment is put on the network, it creates a compromise that is a threat vector for the U.S. Compounding this problem, Chinese companies may be required to provide information intelligence to the Chinese government. The U.S. government has demonstrated commitment to help secure 5G for itself and its allies through the Secure 5G and Beyond Act of 2020. It also enacted a law in March of 2020. This bill requires the development of a federal 5G secure strategy, which also released shortly thereafter in late March 2020. It's open up for public comment for the implementation plan. Additionally, the federal government has taken steps to introduce laws to restrict Chinese telecommunications and network infrastructure throughout the U.S. Through the Secure and Trusted Communication Network Act of 2019. Thank you, Isaac.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. And actually interesting, for an interview, I was talking to Chris Krebs over at Homeland Security, and he was saying one advantage of 5G is we're really out on the forefront of this, whereas other technologies you might be reacting. On this one, we're making sure we have everything actually prepared in advance for the full rollout. Would you say that's accurate, Alan?
Absolutely. We are taking a strategic look of how we roll it out, not only from the U.S. perspective, but also our allies in other nations and stuff of how 5G will work. The major advantage about 5G is that it provides the ability to give us higher bandwidth. Compared to 4G, it's anywhere up to 100 times faster than LG or LTE. It also provides the ability for lower latency, 1 millisecond vice 30 to 70 milliseconds over 4G. That higher bandwidth data rates give 5G not only just for the purpose of cell phones, but using it for general use, Internet of Things, ability to compete, provide that connectivity that you get in your house, whether you have cable or Fios and things like that. Those type of technologies, so 5G can deliver that to you. That higher capability of bandwidth also provides the opportunity for new technologies to come out too. Just like the CPU has changed our computers to where they're now able to do high amount of computing on your mobile phone. The same with higher bandwidth to provide a lot more capabilities in terms of augmented reality, virtual reality, machine-to-machine learning, and things like that.
Great. Well, DJ, I want to bring you into this conversation now.
What are some of the security
baselines and 5G standards engagement efforts coming from our government that really are important for our audience, to know?
Sure. Thank you, Isaac. I think there are two parts to your questions, so I'll address them both. Part number one, in terms of the 5G secure baseline, so let me address that first. 5G has made tremendous improvements in security compared to 4G from the 5G standards viewpoint. So I think the emphasis is the 5G standards, that 5G vendors can make any enhancement they choose to, but doesn't mean that you can get the same set of 5G techniques or improvement from all vendors. So we want to make sure we quantify the scope of the security improvement. What does it really mean? We are looking at from 3GPP, 5G signal viewpoint. And for example, one of the famous improvements is that IMSI, or International Mobile Subscriber Identity in your phone, is encrypted all the time over the air, which can defeat the threats and attacks on a 5G rogue base stations. And this is quite important from the consumer viewpoint as well from the government viewpoint. However, it's important to note that I think Kenny mentioned about non-standalone and standalone 5G deployment. So those 5G security improvements are available only in the 5G standalone modes with a true 5G core. So if a security is a top priority for your organization, a 5G non-standalone network is probably not what you need. In a 5G non-standalone network, the 4G technology is used as anchor for control and signaling, which means that all the 4G problems, security vulnerabilities come with it, and you don't want that. As I think Alan also touched upon this point as well, even though 5G standards provide many security improvements, many security features are mandatory to implement, but optional to deploy. Which means that those features, even security features, are there, but doesn't mean it's turned on at all. So make sure to turn on those optional security features before you conduct 5G testing or deploy a 5G network. And part number two, in terms of standard specification, I think that Alan touched upon this as well. And he specifically mentioned about the Chinese domination of the 5G standards, which is not necessarily a secret per se. And however, that the US government had past tense, had not been an active participant of 5G standards bodies. However, the situation has changed recently. That DoD has formed a Tiger team to start engaging with 5G standards bodies, including 3GPP and artists in different areas. Some of the areas are already mentioned by Alan, including the supply chain, security node slicing, spectrum, and others. And DoD also is developing contribution to be submitted to 3GPP 5G standards. The contribution will to influence the 5G standards direction, such that government requirements can be included. And we have formed a partnership with different government agencies and 5G industry on the 5G standards engagement efforts. And it's very important to note that the partnership is from both US and global perspective. As Alan also hinted on that, 3GPP standard is a global organization. So in a sense that when you submit contribution, it's important to work with all the countries on the topic itself. And in addition, the 5G contribution we provide will make sure have benefit to both government and consumer sectors, not just government sector, such that we also can get support from the industry as well. So thank you, Isaac, back to you.
Of course, and I'm not sure if y'all could hear me say this the first time I was speaking. Obviously was on mute for a decent amount of that. But just a reminder to submit your questions and answers to that tab directly to the left of your video screen. We'll have about 10 or 15 minutes at the end of this session so that we make sure to get to those. DJ, staying with you. I know that, we talk a lot about the security of 5G, but again, this is a technology that we're still very much learning about it and
also developing the technology to go around it. So how can we be sure, how can the government and as well as the different security bodies as well as standards bodies around the world make sure that they secure 5G but not get in the way of that innovation, get in the way of all the different capabilities?
To answer your questions, that's a joke, but anyway, so as Ella mentioned that, almost every U.S. government organizations, agency have a 5G security, either called 5G security strategy, 5G security framework, including White House, DOD, DHS, Department of Commerce, NIST, the Congress, you name it. Everybody has one. So I don't want to repeat those strategies because if you do a Google search, you can find those strategy online. And however, I want to provide some of my own thoughts for securing a 5G network. So first, take a look at the threats associated with your particular use case. Then you check whether I mentioned in terms of 5G security improvements that can address some of the threats. And also, as discussed previously, make sure enable turn on those optional features in 5G security standards. And the next one is any 5G security innovations, for example, network slicing that we mentioned before, or additional secure layers to enhance the overall network security. And one of the models, authentication model used by the government is called Zero Trust model. I think Alan probably mentioned as well. And also has some kind of monitoring and detection of security risk in your network. However, the last point, one more point, that remember the CIA paradigm, not agency. In terms of security, CIA paradigm, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So in terms of most discussions, in terms of the 5G security strategy or framework, you can see that it's about confidentiality, it's about integrity of your communications. Even Zero Trust is about authentication, make sure everything you send can be protected nicely. However, don't forget that under the CIA model paradigm, there's a third element called availability requirements, which is not really addressed too much by the organization, different organizations. So we had also ensured that 5G network has a high availability by deploying techniques to further harden the access and the core networks. Thank you. Back to you, Isaac.
Thanks, DJ. And
Alan,
we've spoken a lot about
how 5G, has potential, but it's
got to be secured. Let's compare it to 4G. What is the advantage of 5G over 4G and other prior networks?
And how does that
help us out with adopting emerging technologies?
Talking about earlier about the bandwidth capability, and similar to the CPU, if you think about the applications on your computer when they were at 16-bit, 32-bit, 64-bit, the higher capabilities that the CPU could process, the more the applications could do more harder type computations. Today, your phone and what it works, well, now you get to where you can 5G gives the possibility of a lot more emerging technologies for Internet of Things. Augmented reality, if you think about the capabilities of the medical staff to do telemedicine and where their limits are today to have more interactive type capabilities. How cars today are and how they, some of the self-driving cars, they have computers inside them. Edge computing becoming a factor, machine-to-machine communication, learning. That makes it where your cars can drive themselves without necessarily needing the CPU inside the car in order for it to drive. There's a lot more self-awareness of the network because of the capabilities. Artificial intelligence will become more prominent now, and it really opens the door for new technologies we can't even envision right now. It will open the door for those things to come out. Thanks, Isaac.
Great. And yeah, thanks, Alan. I keep hearing too that 5G is what's needed to actually push driverless cars over the edge, because it's not just the cars themselves, but it's all the different interconnected systems that have to go along with it, and that just can't be carried on the current network. Kenny, when speaking about the Coast Guard and then other, you all are in areas that may not have a lot of connection traditionally, as well as other rural areas. What's the use case for you all there?
Roger, thanks. So yeah, the use case for rural areas, especially for the Coast Guard. So we have many stations across the U.S. So small boat stations where we have small boat assets that are typically less than about 65 feet in length that respond to search and rescue, perform law enforcement, your bread and butter Coast Guard missions. So as it turns out, most of these stations are in extremely rural areas that no cable company in their right mind would pay to build a fiber connection out there because it would never return on investment. And so it's not just the Coast Guard, but there's a lot of rural users out there who face the similar problems. So in this way, 5G can serve as really your last mile. Is how do I get from that fiber link all the way out to the edge and do it in a way that's inexpensive, that's secure. And so 5G really offers a way to do that. And one interesting part of the 5G standard that hasn't been realized yet, but a lot of people are exploring the idea is satellite 5G. So that's the potential of your cell phone, so your end user equipment being able to actually communicate with low Earth orbiting satellite constellations to provide high-speed internet globally. And there's kind of a various phases of approach to this. You could also just have, let's say, a base station that maybe has a little more power than your typical cell phone, and then use that to either to provide internet access to a variety of assets. So rather than having a small user device, maybe it's a little more robust, but still using that to provide internet. So that's the use case for our cutters. So our cutters travel all around the world, even though we're called the Coast Guard. We're truly global. I can tell you that I was trying to use enterprise applications and systems while underway, like off the coast of Tonga a couple years ago, and 2,000 milliseconds of latency and 50 people sharing a 256K connection is a bad time. And so that's one of those use cases where, hey, global SATCOM, perhaps even using the 5G standard for safety, for security, reliability, could really deliver a whole world of capabilities, especially to our folks out there on the tactical edge.
That's so amazing to me too, especially with what you're saying about the satellite delivery, just being able to reach areas that you never would have been able to previously. And you compare that to kind of what you currently have to do. What sorts of things could you do with that 5G connection that just aren't available right now?
Oh gosh, there's so many possibilities. One, Netflix underway. Do you know how happy people would be if we could give them Netflix underway? I mean, that's kind of a joke, but seriously, retention of our underway workforce is a serious problem that we need to consider. And when we go out and isolate people for 3 to 6 months at a time with barely email, it's a huge factor in their retention because people are expecting to be connected and to maintain relationships while they're underway. And so, giving them that enhanced capability, at least for our organization, it would be monumental. So that's one of the ways that 5G could really, really help you. In kind of the IT centric focus, 5G has the possibility to save you a lot of time and money in investing in your IT infrastructure. So kind of 5G is network transport, and it's one of the legs of the stool here, where you have 5G, you have cloud, and you have, what's the last one? Really, zero trust. And so if I'm migrating most of my core enterprise services to the cloud and I'm securing my endpoint with zero trust, I have the capability to maybe start divesting from my on-premise infrastructure. And that's one of the big value propositions for enterprise 5G is maybe I no longer need to own my routers and my switches and with cloud my servers. To a certain extent, I can, contract that out and leverage someone else's service and make sure that's secure by focusing on the endpoint and focusing on security of my cloud solution. So that's one of the other not as exciting as Netflix underway, I think, but yeah, one of the great use cases out there.
Yeah, Netflix is going to be a tough one to beat, I think, for just about any government organization to brag about. That's pretty enticing.
It's true.
Alan, how about you guys over at GSA? What's really the use case, and what are you all excited about when it comes to 5G?
Well, I would, again, as Kenny said, there's lots of use cases, particularly when we look at some of our rural areas that don't have 5G or even not even have an LTE. What we're looking at GSA is how we can facilitate that deployment to the rural areas. Leveraging federal buildings, we have public building services, and being able to help the telecommunication companies get out there to the rural areas where they need that kind of communication capability. And anywhere that we can help leverage any of the federal infrastructure to support them, we're looking at that so that the rural areas can get plugged in. Right now, prominently, it's in the cities, limited to cities right now, and so it's going to take some time to get this deployed out. There's the one thing about 5G is it can work like LTE in the lower spectrum, the 600 megahertz, but it can go to the high spectrums where there's high demand and high bandwidth requirements to support, as Kenny was talking about, the cloud capabilities. Why need wired infrastructure in your building that you have to maintain that cable plant if you can leverage Wi-Fi and 5G technology to be able to get that same capacity. Thank you.
Great. And I want to remind people they can also submit their own questions. Again, just to the left of our video screen, there should be a questions and answer box where you can do that. So, DJ, one thing I've heard about is network slicing as a top 5G innovation. There's been a lot of interest in that, and it can meet various mission requirements. What really is network slicing, and what can it do?
Thank you, Isaac, for this wonderful question. Thank you. That network slicing is unique to 5G cell technology and really does not exist in previous generations of wide cellular networks. Even though the vendors say that 4G also can network slicing, maybe, but doesn't really conform to 5G standard 3GPP. So as I mentioned before, it's emphasized vendors can do a whole bunch of proprietary implementations, but doesn't mean that those implementations conform to 3GP, 5G standards. And network slicing, as you mentioned, that has a potential to meet many federal government missions by providing, so I think the emphasis is end-to-end security as well guaranteed across services. That's why network slices promises a network slice that in terms of their capabilities, that's the reason you mentioned that a lot of government organizations have a huge interest in this 5G innovation. However, we had to, now we're back to reality here that network slicing requires true 5G core. I mentioned before in terms of standalone configuration versus non-standalone. So in order to do 5G network slicing, you need to have a true 5G core, which is standalone configurations That, by the way, no 5G provider has a standalone configuration today. And vendors are building that products aggressively as we speak. So network slicing will not be available anytime soon, maybe early next year. So that is reality. And also there are certain aspects of network slicing that the audience may have interest in knowing. The first one, in terms of security, that currently network slices security authentication based upon the user primary authentication with the 5G core network. So basically, what does that really mean? For example, that let's assume Kenny has a true 5G phone. I know he doesn't. That he only has like maybe 3G phones, as far as I know. Well, as a joke. But anyway, he want to save money. But anyway, that actually Kenny has a true 5G phone. That once his phone connect to the 5G networks and authenticate with the 5G networks, assuming his phone also support network slice, then which means that his 5G phone can access any network slices he chooses to, because currently the standards does not have network slice specific authentication. And that's problematic, right? That maybe there are slices of proprietary, not proprietary, private. Maybe some slices have high priority that you can access to. Those techniques don't exist today. And you say, what should we do? That's good news that 3GPP, as I mentioned, I keep bring 3GPP back into the conversation, is that 3GPP is working on network slice security enhancement, including the slice-specific authentication, as well other enhancement of secure network slice capability, and that base station slice, that's called radio access network slice. That's the one non-terrestrial network slice, non-terrestrial network NTN that Kenny mentioned. That could be a solution for that as well. And however, last point, in terms of size, back to reality is that they are concerned in terms of isolation between slices. That remember there are all virtualization software implement on hardware, which means that if a hacker is able to access a weaker slice in terms of security, that it's possible, in theory, that the hacker is able to access the other slice through the weaker slice, because isolation may not be solid. So also, however, once again, 3GPP are working on solution on that. So thank you. Back to you, Isaac.
Yeah.
And I see we are just at 2:50 p.m. So we should start wrapping up pretty
soon. However, I know we did start a little bit late, and I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about this and give everybody a chance to close out as well. So, final real question I have, Kenny, how would the pandemic response have been different with the prior adoption of 5G? Obviously, that's a big hypothetical, and that's out there. But what sort of difference could 5G have made?
Thanks for that. And yeah, I've been enjoying my 2G phone, DJ, so I appreciate that. But yeah, so the pandemic and how would it have been different? So from the government perspective, I think what you saw a lot and what you've heard a lot of speakers talking about is I needed to ramp up my VPN access. I needed to increase my VDI capacity. And that's exactly what we saw in the Coast Guard, was that all of our remote solutions require the user to tunnel all the way back to our intranet via VPN or access via a secure VDI client to then access the rest of the network resources or compute or what have you. And that solution just doesn't scale very well. And at least in the Coast Guard, what we saw is pretty rough performance initially across our network as we're trying to scale up VPN capacity, as we're trying to scale up VDI capacity. And so, you know, in the true blue sky 5G future, what you would have is divesting yourself from the reliance on your on-prem infrastructure. And in doing so, your end users could use extremely high-speed 5G connections to go directly to cloud, to access all of your services in the cloud. and you're no longer bottlenecking all of your network traffic through this through this tiny on-prem pipe to then go back out to the cloud or to then go back out to the internet. So big degradation of performance there, but 5G as network transport to enable these other things would be absolutely huge. From the real pie in the sky 5G, the 5G 3GPP standard has provisions for Internet of Things, so to allow high density of network devices, often operating in very low power or kind of infrequent communications. So that's kind of a use case where, maybe in a perfect world, you had a small IoT transmitter, and you could even use that for, let's say, contact tracing or something like that. So again, that's not something that would be achievable in the now, but it's, given the breadth of the 5G standard, would be something that would be relatively doable, and ideally at a lower cost if you could do that. So that's kind of how I think it would have been different. Much smoother sailings for us feds.
Definitely. Alan, I want to go with you to start off this kind of final round of questions. First off, feel free to add to
Kenny's answer if you'd like.
But
also, just what should people know about 5G right now,
and what's next? What should people keep an eye on?
So the first to go back to Kenny's response in terms of the bottleneck and understanding that's why we have where DHS implemented the TIC 3.0 guidance, which allows the network to be more agile, vice the traditional bottleneck that we're used to having in our infrastructure. And that's important. It also use case from the zero trust and being able to make it, because our surface is now changed. Our ability to be mobile, we need to think about how we move forward and where we're not bound by bandwidth by the device or a infrastructure. With wireless capabilities and 5G being able to provide that capability to allow us high-speed connectivity, we need to be able to leverage that technology, but also make it agile and nimble to us, but also secure. We're still in the early stages of 5G. I know a lot of the DoD is going out and putting out the pilot basis to test out 5G. But we also recognize the limitation of the technology to what is available that really truly operates at 5G. So agencies should really think about the strategy and when's the right time to begin leveraging it. There are some agencies that are moving out because they're ready to leverage what's there. But it needs to be, the strategy for each agency needs to be developed if it's not. And how it's going to deploy and leverage the technology so we have the right level of investment. We don't want to invest in something that we can't leverage to its full capability.
I love that. Yeah, I think the
strategies are just so important. DJ, I want to go to you next. What should people take away from this, and what's next with 5G?
Are you addressing me?
Yes.
I'm sorry that I still was pondering on the 2G comments from Kenny. I think one thing about this panel is that as I mentioned. What's reason we hold this panel, right? We're discussing about the 5G strategy, 5G security, and 5G standard contribution, participation. That one of the lesson learned is that it's really not too early to engage with a new generation of southern West technologies. So what I'm thinking is that perhaps that I know Alan mentioned that 5G is still early. I totally agree with your comments. And however, 6G has been mentioned by people already. And when I say 6G, people make fun of me. Oh, there's a 7G, there's 8G, there's 9G. Okay, put aside for a moment that if we have done analysis already that look around the globe, that many countries already work on 6G already. That it takes time to do R&D. It take time to develop your strategy in terms of investment, in terms of different areas of 6G. So one thing learned from this panel is that perhaps also not only we focus on 5G deployment, as Alan mentioned, that a prototyping effort for 5G going on in, I don't know, a dozen bases. Am I right, Alan? A dozen? That also we can start looking at 6G as well to see what does Intel entail in terms of the 5G, 6G strategy for the whole US government. Thank you. Back to you.
Thanks, DJ.
And then Kenny, I guess I'll give you the toughest job of it all. Why don't you close this out and tell our audience what they can go home? What's the number one thing that should be on your list?
I think one of the biggest things is 5G as a piece of your enterprise's digital transformation, your technology revolution, whatever you want to call it. 5G has to be a piece of it. It's a key enabler in terms of network transport, and it will enable you to do a lot of things that you never thought was possible. Like you never thought that you could pick up a taxi from your iPhone. Well, in 5G, I bet you're never going to guess that you can have real-time remote surgery via augmented virtual reality. And that's stuff that the VA is exploring right now. So really, don't think too small when it comes to 5G, but also understand that 5G is part of the whole. 5G is part of your cloud strategy. It's part of your security strategy. It's part of your mobile strategy. It's part of your remote access and telework strategy. It plays a role in everything, but it can't be enabled alone. So that's what I have to say.
I love that. Well,
So much, Kenny, as well as DJ and Alan. I really appreciate you all joining me. I thought this was really informative. And thank you, everybody, for joining and tuning in this. I really enjoyed the chat. I hope you did too. If you want to watch it back and maybe even fast forward whatever being on the screen and you'll not be able to hear what I said, we will have the recording up, and that should be available shortly. So make sure you check that out. Again, my name is Isaac Since I'm a writer for GovLoop. So thank you so much for tuning in and joining me for this session. This is over. HR has a lot of good things planned coming up. So stay safe, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Isaac.
Thank you.